Hello, everybody. This is quite awkward. I have to do the introduction. I'm really quite out of practice. As you'll notice, Glenn Martin's not here. So I'm Katrina Collier. You probably know me best as the author of The Robot Proof Recruiter, which I don't get to show when Glenn does the intro. So this is the benefit of him not being here. Bless these little cotton socks. Welcome to Hear the People live. No, this is Hear the People, isn't it? And thank you, Debbie. Actually, I don't know which side you're actually on.
I'm on this side over here.
The video comes out. It's never where I expect. Debbie Easterday, thank you for filling in for Glenn's enormous shoes.
Absolutely.
Super excited to have the most boomer I know, an industry legend, probably industry god, Mr. Gerry Crispin, as our final guest for 2022. Welcome to Hear the People.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I enjoy this. This is great.
He dressed the part too.
He did.
And yes, I'm in a holiday mood anyway, so might as well go the whole route. And
Love it.
I have my coffee cup with me as well. So
it's very festive. Very festive. Plus, you have like lots of kids around you as well, don't you? So it must be quite an exciting time of the year.
I have three grandchildren who will be with me at Christmas, and I will typically see. I have a very large extended family, almost 140 cousins when you consider that I have on my mother's side 19 first cousins, their kids, their kids, their kids. So
please tell me fundamentally, that you don't exchange presents.
Most of us live, by the way, on the same block.
There's
more than 40 cousins on the same block, and I will close on a house. So I own a house on that block, but my daughter is buying that from me. And I've come of age where I decided I need more resources for the future. And so I bought a house on the same block. And so I'm going to be moving in about 3 to 6 months and into a more modest home, half the size of the house I have.
So hopefully all the first cousins won't come to you next year.
Well, I'm going to need them just to, help fix the house up, kind of.
Oh, well, that helps.
Yeah.
That helps.
What is for? Put them to work.
Speaking of 2023, I was pre-show realizing that would be my 20th year in the industry and was thinking maybe that was time to exit. But you said something quite shocking, that you've been in since grad school, which was 50.
I started grad school in 1969. I finished my engineering degree in 1969 and went on to graduate school for 5 years. And part of that was teaching, but the other part of it was working in career services. Yeah. So I have actually done recruiting throughout my entire career of 50 some odd years.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? But what was your study? What was you called it school, didn't you, Debbie? What was your degree in?
Yeah.
Which mine?
Yeah, Gerry, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Engineering was my first degree, and then a couple degrees in industrial organizational behavior.
Interesting. What about you, Debbie? What's yours in?
Bachelor's of Philosophy of Interdisciplinary Studies.
God, I love it.
What does that mean?
Where was my counselor?
It means she can do anything she wants. Whereas, my stuff, it was very clear. You got to do this shit. Do
you want to know what? I think that it mentally prepared me for a career I didn't even know existed. I had no idea that recruiting was a thing, but all of my studies were around people. Diversity studies, African-American cultures, women in science fiction and gender, Native American cultures. I mean, it was all about sensitivity to people and learning how to be empathetic to other cultures and people. I'm like, I couldn't have planned it better.
That's cool.
I think it's powerful. And to be honest with you, my studies should have included some of that. They were so mechanical, if you think about it, in terms of what engineering is. So it's all formulaic in many ways. And so you have to find your own path outside of that.
But that gave you street cred when you were trying to recruit engineers, didn't it?
Oh God, yes. Oh, without a doubt. Are you kidding me? Yes, I would
and
be
like
able
Steve
as a
Levy would say the
recruiter
same.
to
Oh my
call him
God,
up
what are
and
you
say,
talking about?
yeah, I see that you went to MIT. Yeah, I went to Stevens, but we still appreciate those folks at MIT.
just
just a little bit. We always want them working for us.
On that, I wish I could think of the person who keeps popping up on my feed because they keep sharing like recruitment and talent acquisition manager job descriptions and just how outrageous they are. I'd love to hear your opinion before we go on to the topic of what you feel about the one that I just saw, which had they want them to have come up the HR path to the talent acquisition leader path, which was something like 10 years of HR before they went that path, which is another whole conversation. But they also want them to have an MBA.
Yeah, well,
I don't get the relevance.
The two are relevant, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
corporate, absolutely. You have to know what the org structure is. You need to know that the C-suite has these priorities, and your senior management team is going to have these priorities.
Can't you ask them? Surely a curious recruiter would just ask them.
But a really good MBA has taken human resource related programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And fundamentally,
and organizational development and a lot of other things that you can bring to that HR culture as it sits today that everyone thinks is fine.
Most who graduate, though, what they want is to make a lot of money and become, very, very wealthy. So they ignored some of the things that we should be doing that don't have, as strong a current return. I'd rather make all my money today and screw all those people long term than focus in on some of the long-term issues that we should be doing in terms of retention and challenge and rewarding people who may not be me. That kind of thing. So I have a low opinion of a lot of MBA programs. However, the best of them are pretty cool and do include HR, in my opinion.
So maybe it needed to be a bit more specific, that job description. I was just fascinated by it. Anyway, Mr. Crispin, when we were chatting about this show, you said you wanted to talk about transparency and said you're quite radical. So I just said radical transparency. So is it like I talk about in the Robot Proof Recruiter where I'm talking about the internet opened the door and there is no shuttling the door to your company? Or did you mean something else about transparency?
Well, no, there's a piece of that. I mean, the internet is really providing, for the future anyway, the ability for transparency regardless of whether or not someone else wants it, right? So
yes.
So the first set of issues is transparency exists if you have the skills to mine it, right?
Yeah.
So I can learn a hell of a lot more about anyone out there than they want me to learn. By mining what's available publicly, and that's true. But we don't teach. We don't teach everybody to do that.
No, but then I very clearly remember just the other week, as in last month, it feels like 2 years ago, standing on the stage at ATC in Sydney and asking who'd seen the Stripe and the Twitter layoff emails. And when we all started out, we'd have never seen the layoff. It would have been a letter anyway, but we wouldn't have seen it so readily on the other side of the world. And I went, it was within a week.
So
agree with that. The stuff that you don't want out there. So the fact is,
the internet really has set the stage for a hunger, if you will, for certain kinds of transparency. But the kind of transparency that I'm talking about answers the question, what is it that I need as an employer, as a recruiter, as a candidate, as a team leader in recruiting or HR that will help me make better decisions? And obviously we can argue about what better means, but the point is, let's assume that it's in a positive, constructive way, that we can make better decisions. And fundamentally, there are a number of key issues that immediately begin to start coming up and surfacing across a whole range of things. And one of them is gender equity, gender disparity.
Yeah.
So let's just take that for a moment. I asked 40 heads of TA 2 months ago whether or not they knew if their company was, and this is US primarily, if they knew their company was researching and calculating, if you will, what the disparity in pay was within their corporation in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, etc. And every one of them said, I know that's being done. Every one of them.
Wow.
Now, this is a biased set of TA leaders, right? Because they're my members, and fundamentally they can't become members if they're assholes. So I have a no asshole rule, and I turn down a whole bunch of people on a regular basis. But the point is, they knew that was happening. But I asked how many of you are aware of what that research shows.
Yeah.
Like what the disparity actually is in your company for various roles. None of them, because we don't share that information. They don't have that transparency. And I said, you do realize that starting in the United States, starting with January 1st, if you will, in California, and how many, by the way, have 100 or more employees in California? And all of them did, by the way. They're large companies, so they all had more than 100 employees in California. They said, you're going to have to report on a quarterly basis the average pay of every role and the disparity from a gender, race, ethnicity to the California government. So what do you think they're going to do with that? That's going to be public data. That's going to be accessible data. So your employees will know how compressed, if you will, they are with how you're paying new people coming in, and new people coming in will know whether or not they're getting a fair pay compared to their gender, race, and ethnicity. I said, that's radical transparency. Are you prepared? Are you prepared to handle this? Do you, if you don't have the information, but they do, you're not going to be in a very good position as a recruiter, recruiting leader, or, head of HR. So I'm just taking one small thing that's coming at us in a very big way. And let me add one more thing before I shut up.
No.
And then I apologize.
Good.
49
Jerry, it's your show.
49 out of 50 states in the United States have passed equal pay laws. Many of them are not very good. They're either you have to do a calculation this way, which is stupid, or a variety of other things. And the reason is because their voice isn't our voice. Their voice is the voice of legislators who are upset have constituents who are upset, and they're passing laws, but nobody really in our industry and profession is raising their voice collectively to say, here is the right thing to do, or the right way to get it done. We saw all of these laws being passed that you cannot, at this 21 states that pass laws that say you cannot ask a candidate their salary. And that's really a good idea, because it pisses off all those candidates.
It's wonderful. It also most of them are looking.
But how
and it continues the pay gap, because if I know I'm being underpaid and I want a $30,000 leap to get onto the right pay scale, and you go, but you're only earning 70 now, what makes you think you can have a 30 grand pay? It's just like, that's why you shouldn't ask the question.
But think about
it's none of your freaking business. What do you think they're worth?
10, 15 years ago, we didn't say that. That concept wasn't in existence 10, 15 years ago. In fact, I can show you the training programs of at least 15 different recruiter trainings that basically taught recruiters fundamentally not to ever answer how much will I be offered for this job, until they had gone through all the other things that you should be choosing as well as answering the question, how much are you making? So that I, the employer, can better choose whether or not I should even make an offer to you and get out earlier. So fundamentally, we've seen a shift, a radical shift, if you will, to the
Stephen makes a good point in the chat. He says, however, lots of candidates will volunteer their salary.
They will.
It's really,
and that's their choice. That's their choice.
But fewer and fewer every year, because more and more are being either coached. And by the way, if they're not coached, then they are more likely to be an underrepresented group.
That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, from a probability point of view, and more likely then to be harmed by the fact that they're offering more information than they should be.
Yeah. And if you are a genuinely empathetic, caring recruiter, which I really would hope after 2020 and this year you would be, suggest to them that they don't offer up their salary. I know that kind of probably goes against your thinking. And by the way, if you don't want to do that, that's okay. Is it the 8th of March, Women's International Day? The little bot will be out again on Twitter. And every time your company puts out that we have equal pay, it'll retweet the pay gap.
I love it.
But I love it. I love it because if you delete the original tweet, it still shows this company has it stays. I love it. Absolutely love it. So
world-class recruiters will do that.
But most recruiters do that anymore.
So you indicated I'm a little radical. I don't like the way we are doing it.
Yeah.
Most recruiters today in the United States, so I'm not going to speak for Europe.
Yeah.
But in the United States are taught what? They're taught to ask, what are your expectations?
Yeah.
But we have data over the last 4 or 5 years from Talent Board and other places that indicates that of all the things you could do, that's the second worst. The worst is asking what their salary is. The second worst is asking them, what are your expectations before sharing with them, what the pay is.
Yeah.
And now they're writing laws, California being one of them, that basically say you must legally, if you are asked, what is the pay of this job, you must give it. And then there's a workaround that says, oh, we'll give them 50,000 to 250,000. Right? Which is, again,
that's
more
what a lot
bullshit,
of them
more workaround bullshit, as opposed to us in this industry and profession talking about what would be the baseline standards for how we should operate. We should be agreeing on what those are. And it's not just good recruiters, it's all recruiters should be doing this. And if they're not, they shouldn't be talking to us about being a recruiter.
Yeah.
But then I'm a little obnoxious in my old age. So
occasionally. What do you, Debbie, what do you say to your clients when they're being a bit challenging on that? Do they say, do they want to know what their salary is first?
I do the second worst thing. I always ask people, where would you need to be to make a move right now? You don't, I passive recruit though, Gerry. So I'm working with people who are, so my question is always, what would motivate you to leave a job you already have?
Okay.
Sure.
Right. So, but here's the thing I will also do. I will also say, well, you'd like to make 125. This position can pay up to 140 based on your experience. I know that we could target high end.
Yeah.
Right. And my only point is that they should be juxtaposed. This position should pay up to 140. What would you need to make you whole?
The only reason that I do it in the reverse order is because I feel like everybody has their mental price tag. You know, if you ask me, what would you need to make to give up your company today, wrap it up, sell it off, and then come work for me? I do know that number. And
I understand that.
I think that most people know that number. Now, if you're really jazzed about my gig, you might bend on your number to fit into my range because you really want to work for this company. 6 months later, you're going to be pissed off about something. And then you're going to say, and I left $10,000 on the table for this. It comes back.
So I hear you and I understand. And your way of doing it, in my opinion, helps you to make choices for them and their way of doing it, their preferred way of doing it, they can make more mistakes, but they are going to believe that you are more open, authentic, and honest about what's going on.
No,
the data is showing that the candidate itself does not trust the system, right?
Yeah.
And fundamentally, when they're being asked what their number is, they think it's a trick.
Yeah.
Unless you provide better data.
Yeah.
Or
I agree with that, actually.
They've been coached so that they have learned in advance what the right number might be for them, because they've been forced to think about it, think more deeply, better understand what their costs are and what a true number should be. Not everybody is mature enough to be able to do that well in advance and not worry one way or the other, or not worry about the trust issue.
I think it's trust.
That's my only point. And my point is,
Debbie, I don't know my number. I don't know my number, and I'm reading Stephen's comment there. Yeah, but I'm reading Stephen's comment there, and I think he makes a lot of valid points that they'll lowball themselves.
I know that's true. I've watched,
and maybe again, you've got a US lens, I've got a Europe lens. You know, so I mean, obviously I work with recruiters everywhere, but it's like a car sales process.
All I'm saying is this is a conversation we should all have, right?
Yeah.
And we should come to some agreement.
I love that idea of like, this is the salary band that we have. Is that matching your expectations? You know, what would it take to move? I like that more as a rounded question. But I do agree with you, Gerry. We need to start with what we have.
I honestly would be looking at the research internal to the organization and showing essentially what the range is for a given role, and then take a look at the fact that probably one standard deviation is a reflection of the entry level for that role, and it's a much narrower band than a broad band, if you will. But you have to know how the philosophy of recruiting takes place within that corporation from a rewards point of view, which means beating up the rewards people to learn more about what the hell they're doing.
It doesn't mean actually
when they're putting together that offer for large companies.
Gerry's gone and got them.
Listen, in my graduate school, I learned a hell of a lot about compensation. So the impact is I have no problem going to them and saying, no, I need to know all of your thinking about how you put together a combination of internal, reward issues as well, and compression problems as well as market research. So, until I understand sufficiently, I don't know how to influence you so that I can get the right people hired for the right jobs. So we need to upskill recruiters.
That's an inclusive approach to it. And I love that you're doing not only market analysis, data from the market, which is completely generalized. And Katrina and I were talking about this market average that you're trying to base your number on, and your goal is it's people who span the spectrum from like your all-stars to basically unemployable by most definitions, right? So that middle point, that gets you a C, but you want to hire an A for the C rate.
I want recruiters to be upskilled, to be able to handle the conversation with people in rewards in their company, or with the hiring manager who, if they're dictating some of this stuff. So I just find we have some needs for transparency, and then that requires that you understand what you're learning. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll give you another.
Gerry, you've just reinforced to me. I decided last week that I'm going to make 2023 the year of the intake. I'm going to do everything in my power, whether it's like, harassing directors of TA and saying, could you let me at your hiring managers? Because to get them on site and doing proper intakes where we can have these conversations, because so much of the stuff I hear is that recruiters might want to have the conversation, assuming they're not people pleasers and too terrified, and the hiring managers won't give them the time, and then complain they get the wrong CVs and waste their time. usual shit, different day.
But leaders within.
So it's like what you've just said comes back to that initial. People.
I'm just a fan of the fact that leaders within corporations in TA these days need to lead by upskilling in a whole bunch of areas, and then defending that the recruiters need to have this data in an ongoing way. I'll give you another good example so we can segue to a different type of transparency.
Tools and tech.
So here's what I would like to be able to do if I were a recruiter and I was having an intake with the hiring manager. I'd like to be able to say, for example, so Sean, I'm thrilled, to be here, that you got this new opening, et cetera. I took a look at the fact that, in the last 3 years, you've hired 42 people, and it's pretty cool. And I've noticed that of those 42 different openings that have been filled for you, that here's some interesting data. 40% of all of those slates that you were given and approved were diverse. And yet you only hired 5% of those people who weren't like you. And none of them are still here. I'm here to help you figure out how we can do better than that. Now, there's not a lot of people.
Oh, I can hear the
I bet that's a fun conversation, Jerry.
Well,
I can hear.
I'm talking radical transparency.
I like radical.
I love it. But then I because so much focus has been on tools and technology and data and not the human skills. We've just lost our way. And as you know, I've been rabbiting on about the human skills for years. But it's like I see a lot of recruiters would totally not have the confidence to do what you've just said. They would be terrified to have that conversation.
They shouldn't be recruiters.
No, they should be given the coaching and the encouragement and the capacity to know that they can do that.
So that they can do it. So you're saying they can do it, and therefore
they could do it if we can all speak.
They have to be motivated. You have to have a motive. You have to.
If leaders were to upskill recruiters to that level, it would be demonstrable then that they can or can't do it. Absolutely. And we as their leaders need to have their back, because those hiring managers and those systems are going to push back on that.
Yes.
And that's why I say I'm pushing an edge, if you will, of what is the kind of data that I need to do a better job. You're asking me to put a diverse slate together, but you're not doing what you should be doing with that slate over time. And I'm not talking about a given slate. I'm talking about over time.
What you're doing with that data is then looking to influence and persuade and use a lot of human skills to not offend the hell out of the hiring manager who suddenly has his bias stuck in his face or her face or their face. And it's unfortunately, the people who bring in the people are the most underfunded department in most companies, and they do not focus on these soft skills. I have been witnessing this for years.
So
some of them can't even get to buy this, which Gerry Crispin is in, by the way, as is Debbie, to be fair.
So the workaround of a corporation primarily is that since we haven't helped them with their soft skills to be able to handle that level of conversation, we then have a workaround in which we do not provide them with the data that we have even inside of our company. That data around diversity, for example, and the choke points in diversity are left at a very, very high level. And even in Europe, you in some countries, it's illegal to even track that diversity. So fundamentally, there's a lot of issues.
It's messy.
Right. In the United States,
realize that.
In the United States, you have to track it.
Sure.
Then there's a lot of argument over what that means, granted. But in other countries, not just Europe, but in other countries, they just basically say, we don't allow you to know the answer to this question. So the gender question, but you don't know the race question in many countries. Or the caste question.
There are countries in Europe where it's still illegal. I'm pretty sure I'm talking Europe. I could be going further. That it's still illegal to be gay, and you're only allowed. And you certainly, forget pronouns. You're lucky if you can get gender diversity information. So
Well,
it's just
in the
how
United
it is.
States,
I mean, it's you're
faster than we should.
far ahead, as I would say the UK is as well with all of this.
But we're far
different
ahead.
countries,
But
different cultures.
Without educating the populace that this is the right path to be on.
Yeah.
And so one of the divisive problems in the United States is a disagreement with how far ahead we are.
Yeah.
In some places, some areas, some people, and not others.
Yeah.
And so we really need to, bring people along a little bit better here in the United States. So I'm not going to fly the flag yet until we do a little bit more to engage people.
Well, and there's a psychological safety there as well, right? But I agree with everything you're saying, Gerry. But I know damn well it will also be just making most people go, "Oh,
yeah." Well, I'm tired. I've been doing this for 52 years. I don't want to have to do it for another 52.
Why do you think I've had enough? Why do you think I just
break?
Years? I think I'm done. Like just for here.
I think about the time. I think about the time that transparency saves everyone. I mean, there's the time component. If I'm honest with you about the job and what the job pays and what the job entails, you can really use this information to decide, is this the job for me? If you know going in that you're going to be working for a micromanager, you can choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know what, Katrina, though, that's you. Some people
love it.
Want to be told what to do. Some people love someone saying every day, today you'll do this, this, and this. And then you do that, and that, and you've had a successful day.
And honestly, early in my career, that's what I wanted as well. By the way, the gorgeous people who are tuned in over on LinkedIn, we can't, if you want to add a comment or say anything, I know you're there, but we won't see it. So you'll see a link.
Can you see my LinkedIn?
You'll see. Sorry?
I'm seeing a lot of good comments. Steven.
Anyway, there is a link there that says for the best experience. So feel free to come over here to Crowdcast, which is what Gerry's talking about. I can't see LinkedIn comments. Or they add something and then I can't reply because I don't understand LinkedIn. And obviously anywhere else you may well be tuning in because I haven't got any of them open. So come over to Crowdcast. There's a link.
No, I think you're right. Steven's been chiming in. He has had some great insights. I mean, when we were talking about
he's basically saying what we're saying, that we have to invest in upskilling, but we then have to make sure that the people have the tools and resources, the data, in order to then make use of it. And that's the problem with a lot of the technology that's out there, is it's not being used in a way that allows for us to take insights and to do some stuff. And
it always reminds me of the boudoir grand piano that I now don't have in my house because I've moved, but my ex-husband has, that neither one of us could ever play. I could maybe manage, like Mary had a little.
So it's a frustration.
And it's like, this is to me what HR tech is like. We get given it, we get given LinkedIn, we get given this, and then we're not taught how to use it in a really human, fantastic, compassionate way. And
well, then there's a workaround issue. So now I, as the recruiter, because I don't have access to any of the information about the diversity of the pool of talent that I put into my database who've expressed an interest in this job, I have to infer about gender. I have to infer about other kinds of things if I'm going to put together a diverse slate, or I just randomly pick, and then guess what? It isn't as diverse as it might have been for people who are capable of doing this job in a positive way. So, this scratches the surface.
Yeah. What's the next one? You said there was another.
No.
Oh, there's
multiple levels of transparency.
I know, I love it. I don't think I've ever been so vocal on a show before. I'm like,
think about what you want to know as a candidate. We make assumptions. Like we make assumptions about that number that people might have in their head. They may not have the number, and some do. But we shouldn't assume that they do. We should be able.
And you're right. Look at some don't, but that's when I'll talk through them. And that's like what Stephen was saying earlier. This is usually when they're like, well, I'm here. And I'm like, okay, but that's only your base salary, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, what else do you have? Do you have bonuses and incentives?
Right.
Like,
So
you sometimes
you
have
help
to know
them.
what you're leaving.
I'm
to know where
only
you
I'm
wanna
only
go.
raising the issue about the juxtaposition of how we deal with this, given how society is changing things for us by passing laws. There are a number of key laws. So New York, for example, you have to supply validity data to the candidate about any tests that you use starting next year. Now, here's the problem. Most people don't know what validity is.
Right, but aren't all of the psychometric companies going to be busy?
They're all going nuts because many of them don't have the data in the format that works. At best, they have concurrent validity, but almost none of them have predictive validity unless they've been operating for years in a given system and collecting data and looking at that from that perspective. So unless you've got PhDs with PSYOP experience working in your organization, it's very unlikely that you can be using tests and defend those tests to the candidates who are going to be asking you because the law's been passed. So they're going to get coached and they're going to ask you, why should I take this test?
Yeah.
What is it that you learned from the test? And by the way, why don't I get the same information? I will tell you, I turned down over the course of my career, I turned down at least 15 opportunities to work in human resources because I refused to take a test that I did not get the data.
Yeah, agreed.
And they would go, well, yes, but you have to understand the data. And I said, take a look at my background. I do understand the data. I helped create tests. So don't give me any of that shit. I want to know. I want to know the same answers you have. I'm not, and that's a shift that's going to take place, I think, over the next couple of years.
I love that idea.
Is a better understanding of the kind of assessments that inform employers, but also should be used to inform the candidates. So the candidate may not go forward in this company, but they may learn enough about themselves to be able to reform, their point of view about the kind of job that they would be most successful in.
Wouldn't that be amazing? They could end up doing something that they love and they're successful in because they understand themselves.
Right. Why are people not giving the candidates the results?
That's a very long conversation, but
I always do.
Not well at the executive level, without a doubt, it's being done. But that's a 1% of all of the hires.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to hire 30,000 hourly workers and you're giving them 2 or 3 assembly kinds of tests and assuming that they understand exactly how well they've done, that ain't happening.
Yeah, and we're just using this test to disqualify you, essentially.
Exactly. Well, that's their perception.
Yeah.
Right. So because no data.
I want to come in here and jump in.
I think that's where all of the anxiety around these psychometric tests come from. They're like, I love this job, and now we have to take this test. I'm going to fail it. And
remember, I want to answer the question. I want to answer the question as a candidate.
Yeah.
What information do I need that helps me understand not can I do the job, but will I do the job?
Right. Will I be successful?
The employer can say, no, we've decided you can't do the job. Here's what you need. Okay. But if they say, oh, you can do the job, but we're not going forward, or you can do the job and we are going forward, I still want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it that I want in this work, in this career that has nothing to do with the damn job description? I want to know
what's cool about this job. Yeah.
I want to be developed, for example, for a higher level job. So how many people who have worked for this person in this job are still with the company and we're moved up versus moved out? That data isn't available, but I have to share 100% of all the relationships I've had with employers and why I left them.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have to share, my love life in work,
I want to know my words.
You should be sharing about how much love you give in work, as the hiring manager.
And I want to just rephrase that question instead of like, why did you leave? Like, what was unfulfilling about your last role, or
you're being nice.
Kind. I am nice though. I'm Australian. We're lovely. Stephen O'Donnell has put here, I love the data from these assessments, and all candidates benefit from being more aware of their own abilities. I so want to jump in. Yeah, sorry, Stephen, it's the Gerry show.
Yes, Stephen, get your own.
We'd never get a word in if I had the two of you on. And I'd be like,
no, I love
he has
Stephen.
Many of his own shows.
I read his
he
stuff
does
all
a lot
the
in
time.
that space.
He's right on target for sure.
I just
some
think
people are doing these things. Some people are doing these things. So none of this is new.
Yeah.
The problem is it's being done in such small numbers, so consistently, and we're not making candidates aware that these are kinds of companies that if you even apply for a job, you're going to learn enough that will help you apply more competitively for other jobs in other companies. And so these are companies that you should be looking at first, perhaps, because the treatment that you're going to get will help to inform you about your work in relation to your job in relation to your career, and your career in relation to the stage of life that you're in. And fundamentally, we're all trying to do that for ourselves, either intuitively or intentionally when we get mature enough to be able to go, oh, where the hell am I going in all of this shit?
Hannah says,
Hannah Morgan,
start the list, Gerry.
Start the list. But you know what? It's really interesting that, like, the point you're making there. I think then that it would reflect really well on the company as well. Like, if they're going to treat the candidates that well, they're going to treat their employees that well, because this is radical thinking, as you're saying. Yes, but it's like you also, there's even just the apprehension in the knockout questions. Like, when they're doing the diversity tick box, for example, well, if I write that I'm non-binary and that I'm gay, well, am I knocked out? Like, there's that fear in those, and then it's like, then there's even more fear when we then get into the psychometrics. So I feel if it's like, hey, don't worry if you fail, you're going to get all your data. Maybe you'll end up in a career that's actually better suited to you. You're going to learn something. We're going to give you something valuable at the end of this time that you're investing in this.
My hypothesis right now, and I don't know anybody that has the data, but my hypothesis right now is that more and more people from underrepresented groups are refusing to share information about their group, if you will. They're turning off their pictures on LinkedIn.
I've seen that.
In increasing to basically cover all of what they fear is happening out there. And I think one way to address some of that for the better companies, obviously, is to have more transparency that would say, for example, when you provide this information, here's how it is being used, and by the way, here are some of the results of that use of that show that we are hiring, if you will, a greater percentage of people from underrepresented groups to get closer to what actually is demographically appropriate. And that's
anonymized, it's going to go into the background, and here we've increased diversity this way. But again, that goes back to trust. So they're going to have to see a lot of
so for example, if you're going to share the diversity information with a recruiter so that they can better form a quality slate that's appropriately diverse for the underrepresentation of a group, all right, then you need to inform the candidates that you are sharing that data with recruiters who, by and large, have succeeded in doing the following, and then you're changing the game a little bit, in my opinion, and you need to be able to share with a candidate that, we have 200 developers here and 4 women among them. And while we're not so sure how we got there, because we don't want to get sued.
Or aware.
The point is we're trying to change that.
Yeah.
And here are the actions we're taking in response to that. And
then that gives people an opportunity to opt into that.
Yes.
As well, and go, you know, I don't care. Like,
I'm just saying there's a responsibility for transparency.
Yeah, love it.
That extends beyond simply the person who gets the information. Who do we need to inform that this person gets the information, if you will?
Yeah.
And I think that we are better off in doing more of that, because if we don't, then anybody who is coached or has the resources will be able to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
But the people who aren't coached, who don't have the resources, who are the least likely, will become more, it will be more difficult for them to get into a competitive position.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think more of them will take to the internet and write about it. There's a boldness there that, I mean, I know when I wrote the second edition of the Robot Proof Recruiter, there's a story in there, I can't say who, big job board aggregator that pretty well everybody knows, made somebody feel incredibly uncomfortable about his sexuality. He was passed over for promotions, work that was claimed as their own. And he wrote 2 articles right there on LinkedIn about it. There's no fear of the long-term repercussions, which we would have had earlier in our careers where we wouldn't have done that. And that's the other, you know, the employees have the power. They understand.
Because you've got a trail of comments of other companies who are saying things like, come join our team. We love diversity at blah, blah, blah.
His new employer, this wouldn't have happened. Imagine back in the day, you slagged off your employer. You were unemployable, you know, but his new employer has actually written a really fantastic comment on it. Well, thank goodness that happened, because we've got you now.
Yeah, now
it's like wow, like wow.
Yeah. I mean, people feel empowered because they're seeing similar things happen to other people, where they're like, I was a victim in this workplace, and now I took my voice to LinkedIn, and now I had 137 likes and 15 comments, and 3 job offers, and
think of all the people who've left Twitter in the last 2 weeks. All of them.
All they have to do is say,
all of them are interviewing everywhere.
Yeah, they'll have job offers. Yeah.
It's not a negative from that perspective, because so much now is in public domain.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, you know, I do think that we're, as employers, we either come willingly and take into account the conversations that have to be made, as well as the investment in the upskilling of hiring managers, of recruiters, of leaders who need to get, you know, their head slapped a little bit, so that they're supportive and have the backs of the people who now have the data.
Yes.
If we do that, I think those corporations are going to move forward quickly. And the others, our colleagues and peers who are not doing these kinds of things, they're going to come kicking and screaming because they will be forced by the candidates or lack of candidates.
Or legislation, or they'll be forced by legislation.
Or the legislation.
Well, it has to be enforced legislation, doesn't it?
You know, I get upset with some of the legislation because they don't take into the nuance how an employer might screw with the legislation. So the good example is, my favorite example is Colorado, where they had an equal pay law and required that if you're going to have a remote job, any that would be available to someone in Colorado, you must indicate what the pay is for that job. And as a result, hundreds of companies basically posted jobs on job boards that basically said at the very bottom, this job is available to anyone except people in Colorado.
Yeah.
And that is just wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I was calling, I had about 5 members that were doing that. And I basically called them and said, you can't be a member. This is just stupid. You know, this is not, you know, right. And if you're doing this, what else are you doing? Tell those lawyers to go jump in a lake and figure out how to meet the intent of this law, even though you don't like the onerous part that you now have to figure out how to put a pay, range in there. I mean, get over it. Get over yourself and figure it out.
Well, and look at every company knows what they've budgeted for the position. You know your pay range.
I know. Well, most do, but they don't want to share it because there's a fear that
what if we could get someone cheaper?
Well, there's a fear that market price. There's a fear that I could get somebody. There's a hope that I can get somebody a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
There's all of those things, and none of them have to do with really running your company in the most positive way that sets it up to be as successful as it should be. Because you hire people underpaid, eventually they're going to figure it out. We've now passed laws that make it illegal to fire somebody because they shared their pay. So every kid is sharing. Oh, this is what I'm making. This is what I'm making. Yeah. We didn't do that 20 years ago because we thought it was rude manners.
We thought socially it was rude manners to ask somebody. So what are you making, Gerry? Katrina, what do you pay? What are you bringing in? What'd you bring in last year? We wouldn't have thought to even ask a peer, a friend,
I know,
family member.
The other thing though that it does is that sometimes people will actually take a pay cut to work at a company.
Yes, they will.
So we're forgetting. I know it's a smaller number, but it could be. Look, I know I was paid a lot at this company, but actually I'm not fulfilled. I love your mission. I'm happy to take a cut. So it's, I think sometimes we forget that as well. Tombo, it's offshore and nearshore workers to cut employee costs. Yeah, but so many have learned the lesson of that. I've seen a lot of stuff come back to the UK that was sent away from the UK.
I agree. I agree with that statement, though. In the U.S., there is a workaround that promotes offshore and nearshore workers to cut employee costs. And for years in the United States, we would go from one city to another. So we'd be in Czechoslovakia, and then we'd be in Poland, and then whatever, and call them some kind of special center for coding or whatever.
Excellence.
But the moment the workers required that they raise the pay, they moved the damn center to somewhere else. Well, you know what? You run out of stuff, and you also get a reputation that's not so good. I'm convinced that now that we're more comfortable doing work anywhere, we should have a base level for any job. So we should be able to say, no matter where we are in the United States or the world, we should be paying X. And if I require somebody to be in San Francisco, then I'm going to say you get the base pay plus, because I require you be in San Francisco, I'm going to give you X amount more while you're in San Francisco. If you did that, if you did that, as opposed to saying to somebody who said, oh, I can work from anywhere, I'm going to go to Iowa. And your boss going, oh, if you're going to go to Iowa, I'm going to cut your pay in half.
Cut your pay.
That's what I would pay somebody in Iowa. Yeah. And that's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's all the companies that set up in Seattle and San Francisco and the likes that have made the cost of living so insane. It's all of the tech companies that did that created these hubs, inflated the salaries. I mean, it didn't used to be like that.
Yeah,
but then so much real estate,
and now that but they've done that, and now they're moaning that some of their employees want to leave the state and be on the same salary. It's like you can't have it both ways, companies.
What is the value of this job? And if the value of this job is $100,000, then you should be paying somebody $100,000, whether they're in Seattle,
wherever they live,
or in Mumbai.
Like they can live on $100,000 in Seattle.
But I might be willing to move to Mumbai or to Portugal. If I could do this job and do it well and make $100,000, because I could put more money in my pocket as opposed to the bonus of $20 million that the C-level gets.
And not to mention, a lot of people are now, a lot of this younger workforce, they don't have permanent home.
Yeah.
They're taking their remote jobs and they're doing 3 months.
They're remoting.
They're doing 3 months here. They're going abroad. They're living.
Yeah, I know some old farts doing that as well.
Like it.
I know we're at the end, but I bought an Airstream, which is a trailer that is kind of cool. And it's my third Airstream. And if I could, I would sell everything and I'd be on the road for at least 2 years,
Yeah.
As a nomad for sure.
But you probably could. I mean,
you could.
Oh, I can, but my wife would not want to do that.
Oh, okay.
We're not doing it. It's not going to happen.
Crispin.
But I can say this.
As soon as my kids are out of school, I'm
going remote. I'm going remote.
Yeah, I will tell you, my daughter's looking at that Airstream saying, Dad, just don't ever sell that. I know you're using it as sort of like the guest cottage at the moment, but don't ever sell it because we have ideas someday.
We may need to borrow it.
I believe it.
But it is extraordinary, this world that we now live in. That that we have got to this point, and there's good and bad with it. I think we've discussed some of the potential for some amazing good to come out of this very different world.
Yeah, so
when I started in the world of work 30 years ago, it was not like this.
No,
what a dream! The thought of
that's why I love this transparency issue. I think it's an important one. I think we should find a way that we could collectively, Stephen, by the way, collectively have a conversation and then promote that conversation with all of our names, our titles, our companies, etc. If we operated on a more collective basis, we might be able to influence more rational kinds of legislation, influence our peers and colleagues who might be a little slow to move. But I think we should be engaging together in our industry more than we have in the past. A lot of people are doing interesting and good things individually, but I think it's time that we have a collective voice, and we just have never built that.
Never managed to
we
have
don't
one.
have a SHRM for for TA.
No,
and we should.
It's never happened, has it?
No, it's not.
Well, that's your goal for 2023 sorted then, Gerry.
No, this is not my thing.
Ding, ding, ding. You're nominated, Gerry.
No,
Damn it.
No.
I was like, Jerry's top goal for 2023.
I got better things to do in the next 52 years.
Love it. I love how old you're going to live as well. That's very impressive thinking there.
It is. It is.
We're out of time. Thank you for all your questions as well. All your comments and all your questions. Yeah. Sorry, Stephen. It just wasn't. There was just no space for you. We had too much going on. We will be back on the 4th of January with Rebecca Collis as well, who is internal talent acquisition at AMS. So can't wait for that conversation. Bless her. So anybody who's actually back to work on the 3rd, tune in. Nice and early start for the year, isn't it? And also to all of our listeners and to everyone who, always either they catch up or they tune in live. Thank you for your support through 2023, and may you have a fantastic festive season and a brilliant 2023. Gerry, I think I just said 2023 twice. I think I meant 2022. Yeah, I'm throwing the year away. I knew what I meant. I think I actually sent I sent an email out with that on it, and someone replied and went, "You mean 2022?" I'm like, "Oh God." Yeah, never mind. It's going awfully fast is all I have to say.
It's fun. It's fun.
Debbie, thank you so much for tuning in and covering for Glenn. I don't even think he appeared in the chat. Bless his cotton socks. He's still in transit. Gerry, thank you. What a fabulous way for our last show to end the year. 2022.
My pleasure.
If people want to find you, usual places, just come stalk you on LinkedIn.
If you can spell Gerry with a G, you can probably find me.
He'll manage.
Yeah. I'll also put links. I think there might be a link there already, but I'll make sure they're there.
Okay. It's there.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Again, have a fantastic festive period and a brilliant start to 2020.